Are you on for a second?
I'd like to welcome you all to this next beautiful poetry session. We have two wonderful poets with us here. Next, I'm going to introduce them in the order of appearance. First up, we have David McLoghlin. His most recent book is Crash Centre, came out in May 2024, with Salmon Poetry, and he has two further books, Waiting for St. Brendan and Other Poems, and Santiago Sketches. He has been published in journals and he has been broadcast on radio in the US and in Ireland, and he's been a Patrick and Catherine Kavanagh Fellowship recipient in 2023. He has also performed at many festivals and he teaches creative writing and literature between the US and Ireland. Please give a warm welcome to David McLoghlin.
Never forget the water, that's what they say. I just want to thank Paul Casey and O'Vale for sort of creating and maintaining community in Cork and beyond through the internet. And I'm just really happy to be included in this program, so I'm delighted read here for you today. I'm just gonna, the past 6 months, so my book came out in May of this year, and I've been doing a certain amount of readings, and not overdoing it too much. But basically, yeah, I've been solely reading from the new book, Crash Center, but I thought today I'd read a little bit from the previous two. And I thought I'd go backwards in time, start with Crash Center, and then go to, the second book was actually the first one that was written, so I'll read from that last. Just a little bit from each book. So just, and also, like, I'm sure poets identify with this, that you sort of identify for yourself which ones you think are your best, quote, the pillars of the book. So I've read from the pillars so much that I'm going to read from the ones that aren't so pillary. And maybe, yeah. So it's kind of, you would see from the back cover, it's a story of abuse, and but that is the surface story, the sort of subterranean. The story within the story is all of the kind of gaslighting and kind of like hypnotism that goes on between a kind of a sort of a mentor and a toxic mentor and a sort of a young 17-year-old would-be poet. And that kind of thing continues in the speaker's life into his 20s, and then he reports to the Gardaí, etc., etc. So there's a kind of like a memoir-like kind of, there is the core story, which is set in the past, and then there's the adult story, which is sort of set in the present of the narrative, as it were. Yeah? Okay, so a friend of mine told me that this poem is kind of like, I only let this poet out once a year, so I thought I'd let him out today. It's called Porn King. And a student had said to me, how do you write humor? And I said, I don't have a clue. But then actually there is humor in this, but then it's turned to a dark purpose. Porn King. Procrastinating, afternoon to evening behind a daylight curtain, goes fuzzy and white, hopscotching inside the honeycomb. TV with spag ball, 2.5 portions. Kenko instant, 2 beers, 3, then carpet burn. The mood bath so warm and soft, it verges on fiberglass, like being wrapped in cotton wool. A finger from a saint's hand, or some other wanker, a relic from the days of dial-up. 1995 and 1996 spent disassociating. It takes so long to load, I mutter bollocks and go to make tea instead. In my absence, a woman's head smiles, waiting for her body to arrive. The modem hisses, criss, criss, the sound of something coming down the line. It recalls a documentary's solemn, imagined end via black hole, where I elongate like taffy, and in the event horizon, and then I'm obliterated, pixel by pixel. Before we knew about webmail and put our trust in hosts out on the ether, my parents paid for Anne, Brian, Ruth, David, Rebecca, and Mark, all snug at islandhouse.iol.ie. When email was local, visiting my parents, I got itchy for something half decent and used Dad's computer to just subscribe. Back in Dublin, I got the call. David, I got this strange email from, here he italicized, xxx.com. Pause. Your mother feels pornography is degrading to women. My head bowed, I nodded, a dripping tap. After that, for a while, my sister's boyfriend called me the Porn King. I was 15 when Ricky Roach liberated a mag, We, out of his father's arsenal. 10 of us crowded round the naked couple on the bonnet of the yellow Ferrari. She, amazing, dyed blonde. He, only relevant in equipment terms. Incredible positioning and nothing for the imagination. Over the coming weeks, one by one, we crept back to the dorm to tear pieces for wank fodder, until there was nothing left but bad prose and ads for vibrators. A year later, me and Father Narcissus are sitting in the monastery guest kitchen, just beyond the lintel marking the enclosure. The distance from sacred to secular is like Zeno of Elea slicing space, like meat you can see through, or Occam's razor. Narcissus' legs are crossed under the belted black robe, Friar Tuck in black polyester socks and Birkenstocks. He says, I have something here to show you, David. And from a manila folder, out of a sheaf of papers that could have nihil obstat all over them, he hands me a magazine with naked men smiling on the cover. Well, we've been discussing your sexuality, so I thought this might help. What do you think? Do you like that? I don't know, I say. I'm with my best friend. Why am I afraid? As the pages turn, bulbs explode, paparazzi or pornographers crowding round, jostling for a piece of me. I go into another room, multiverse of cotton wool and string theory. There's an alarm ringing somewhere, but the tongue's been taken from the bell. At a party years later, who is it that counts the gaps among the years? I gather some friends, go up the spiral stairs to Dad's study, input a password on a site. I don't even ask, why am I doing this? Everyone acts naturally. Now I imagine the happy couples asking each other later that day, why do you think he showed us pornography? It has happened during pillow fuckery. Close to the laptop screen, optic nerve and eye lie horizontal outside my body, like leaving cert biology diagrams, something lopped off, but still connected. Her face is close to the camera. Our eyes meet. Help me. Thanks. Yeah, that's my first time reading that one, so. Okay. I'm just going to go to, I also have like built into the collection, I think there are these necessary rests for the reader as well as for myself. This one is called Crone Mountain, and it sort of takes place in West Kerry, and it takes a line from Garcia Lorca, Romance de la Luna Luna, the last line. Okay, sorry, just a second. And I don't think I need to explain anything else. Just that within Lorca's work, the moon is such a huge presence, and I just kind of borrowed his last line from that poem. Crone Mountain, after Lorca. Moon, chrome tear on the cheekbone of Crook Vorhan, seeping through skylight, roof tiles, and concrete, swimming the room. Like a tide pouring out in spate, the stranger I hold back from watching daily, new planets, Titan, Europa, traveling at speed over water. Moon, madness of spring tides, stillness in the head like a hurricane. The bed is a white space that is traveling. My body's a cutout on the sea of tranquility, mercury dappling, making it beautiful to the one who isn't here. Tall, dangerous, white lady, outside the door now, turning the key. Eyes, crescents of glacier, breasts of polished tin. So you can see that Lorca reference there at the end, or the Lorca line. Thanks. Okay. Okay, how much time do we have left, did you say? 10 minutes maybe, or? Okay. Thank you, Paul. It's amazing how one loses track of time when one is actually up here. Okay. I read another one. This is kind of takes place in the kind of the after, as it were, of the narrative, when the adult. And so kind of I go back to the monastery to meet the Father Narcissus character, not realizing what really happened back then, like still within the context of, oh, well, that was a romantic relationship. It wasn't what I later discovered it to be. Trapped by trees, the year 2000. Cozy in the same parlor as before, my mind snips the tubes between sensation and memory, his face avid, almost billowing. This time I'm an old boy in my late 20s, gold-mooned or returned Glen Stallion, driving my mother's car on a learner's permit. Receptionist nod, grave, half-comic inclination of old teachers stopping to chat, Narcissus a pace back, witnessing, half-smiling, as Father Simon mocks, "What are you doing back here again, McLoghlin?" The affection acknowledges, "I've passed beyond their remit, but I'm still tied." Wild rain, monks in the rear view, gather, skirts, and run for the castle. Halfway along the front avenue, a big oak's down, circumference to my window screen top. A screeching five-pointer in second, branches bristling, blood trees in the optic nerve. No worries, route home via the back avenue. But another big one's fallen in the space of my stopping. Fairy tales would connote a mysterious funneling towards some end manipulated by castle or manor house. I walk back up towards twinkling medieval lights. Monks gather matronly, concerned but ambivalent about external disturbance so close to Compline. Narcissus gestures all of that bullshit away with a hand chop. Give him the phone. Pursed lips hand over the bakelite I used to dial him, 185, 100 times. I ring my parents. You'll stay for dinner, Narcissus says, then we'll get you on your way. I process in with the monks and some guests, pre-novice tryouts, conservative and civies. Listen to a reading from the podium, some desert father or obscure apostle. Everyone fast spooning soup in silence. We stand for prayer, process out. Buoyed, I walk down. Someone's freed me with chainsaws. I drive through the trees. The road home routes me around the avenues. My Mobius for the foreseeable years ahead. Thanks. I'm going to finish this reading from this book with the second last poem. So the book does take this kind of like journey from sort of darkness into light, and this kind of is the second last one, and you'll see that sort of scene that'll be registered here. I did put on a bit of a northern accent there because the Father Narcissus character is from Northern Ireland. I didn't explain that before. Blessing the blind man. Inside reception, where the red clay walls had an indwelling hush that was Coptic hives or cool barrel of rain, I was starting to drink it before you fouled the water. Blind man on retreat asked, "Could I have your blessing, Father?" "Oh, of course," you said, unctuous, wearing your monk mask. Just before, you'd been raging. Getting on our tour bus, an elderly nun from the country ventured, "Pray for me, Father Narcissus." "Pray for me, Father. That fake fucking piety era don't talk to me." Very little chastened you. I said, "I've been learning healing," was trying to explain energy. The blind man nodding, seeming to see, when you cut in, reclaiming prime orbit. I respect other traditions, but it's just not Christ. Watching your hands an inch above his head, I froze. Maybe there was a thought far down, something about being 22 and you're paralytic, going for healing to the pool that narcotized me, slipped a spine into me. But if there was, I wouldn't grasp it for 13 years. Now I'm 50 and I am beside myself. My hands were hot, sublimating, a rage itch. The blind man bowed his head to receive, so vulnerable, it cuts like a wound. What did he have that protected him against your hands? You stood in the silhouette of the sun, deliberately haloed, a usurper where God should have been. Even as you blessed, you were aware of effect and camera angle. Like when you told me, "If you want to see me as I really am, look at me on the altar on Sunday as I break the bread." But I have seen you naked. I've seen you slavering. So I say, see me stepping out of your eclipse into real sun. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to read a couple from Waiting for St. Brendan. And the kind of motif or the kind of through line of this book is kind of my own experience of like moving between countries, and then the discovery of St. Brendan as the kind of patron saint of travel in the early Celtic Church. And so in my research, I came across this really beautiful little fragment. I can't remember the source of it. Oh, it's from Diciul, Liber de Mensura Orbis, and written in Latin. So I just lifted his text, and I thought it's beautiful. And it kind of like, since St. Brendan in the book of his journeys describes these different magical islands, I thought that this would be a really, really nice thing to add into the book in terms of its kind of weaving that Brendan journey through my own experiences. The Paradise of Birds. Diciul wrote, "There are many other islands which can be reached from the islands to the north of Britain in a direct voyage of 2 days and nights, with sails filled with a continuously favorable wind. A devout priest told me that in 2 summer days and the intervening night, he sailed in a 2-benched boat and entered one of them. There is another set of islands, nearly all separated by narrow stretches of water. In these, for nearly 100 years, hermits sailing from our country, Ireland, have lived. And just as they were deserted from the beginning of the world, so now, because of the Northmen pirates, they are emptied of anchorites and filled with countless sheep and very many diverse kinds of seabirds. I have never found these islands mentioned in the authorities. I'm just going to finish reading from this book with this one. So I was kind of like interested in the whole, the sort of Scandinavian connection, because he would have traveled to this mysterious island, to North America via Greenland, via Iceland and the Faroe Islands, as Tim Severin pointed out in his great book, The Brendan Voyage. So this is a Norwegian cameo, and it's sort of set on a Ryanair flight to Haugesund in around 2000 or something like that in southern Norway. Norwegian cameo. Banking over Haugesund, an old woman in pinstripe trousers, white wool fleece and black Reeboks, slighted over the sterling for chocolate, looked up, and as if 40,000 feet had opened under her, the young air hostess stopped. On the liver-spotted hand, I saw a ring holding shards of flint and iron, fragments, like courage, of a tradition inlaid in the silver. Her eyes were the longship, and they were unself-pitying and clear. Okay, I'll just read a couple from Santiago sketches. So I spent a year on an Erasmus program, and in Santiago de Compostela at the age of 21, way back in 1993. And that year would have been lost if I hadn't, it would have been lost to productivity. It was a very, very unproductive year, but it was a great fun. But but I kept a little diary. I would go around the city writing, and I produced many, many little journals. And then eventually, 20 years later or so, 2013, I actually put it all together. And I kind of had about 1,000 pages, which then were edited down to this. So I'll just read a few little pieces. They're really, really short. They take a lot of inspiration from haiku, but they're not haiku. Most of them aren't. 90% are not haiku. So this one in the Lazarillo de Tormes in the Spanish, tradition, a picaro is a picaresque character, a rogue. And of course, some of these poems reference this, the Santiago Camino, the pilgrimage. Picaresque. Beggars argue, passing women in fur coats. As a pilgrim limps into the Quintana, gutter punks, junkies, beggars, lounging on the steps, drinking cartons of wine, perk up. Okay. This was written in a lonely mood. Walking out of the city along Rua do Pombal in the late afternoon, prostitutes lean in doorways. They don't call to me, even tiredly. I glimpse empty beer crates in she-bean bars, beds behind bead curtains at the back of them. And I just kind of really enjoyed so I learned, obviously Spanish, but then the sort of minority language of that region of Galicia is Gallego, or Galician, and I learned that later. So that kind of came back to me to help me inform my writing of this. And so these are 3 little fragments which I created one poem out of, and it's all about the etymology or translations of the Galician words. You'll see. Praza de entre pracinas, square between small squares. Music from an attic. Rua do Olvido, the street of forgetting. Swans asleep in the rain, pattering on the Art Deco Moorish pool in the Alameda. The name of the park, it means grove of poplars. So when I used to live in West Kerry or Dingle, well, west of Dingle, I discovered, people told me about the pilgrimage from St. James's Church on Main Street. They would take the boat from Dingle town all the way down to Coruña, and then they would walk to Santiago. So I was just imagining an Irish pilgrim in the medieval days here. And they used to call it El Dinguel de Santiago, the dingle of Santiago. A cross decipherable in sandstone, the full moon in a window, in light of which sometimes I see writing on the stone, graffiti of an Irish pilgrim. They wrote El Dinguel de Santiago in the Book of Arrivals. Then he missed the boat back. And I'll just read one more from this, and then if I have time, I'll read one last maybe one last poem. So like Spanish is incredible for the blasphemies of the swear words, and like you hear some incredible, wonderfully expressive blasphemy in the lingo. Old men sit talking at the plateria store of the cathedral. Me cago en Dios! I shit on God, one routinely punctuates. The arcade arches of Rua Nova and Rua do Vilar sheltered them in winter. Now in late June, they still walk in the shade. Cicadas make a deeper silence, and summer opens its distances. Would I have time for one more? Okay, I'll do a really short one. Okay. Very short. This is from Crash Center. David Kieran. I remember David Kieran, who in boarding school walked the unintentional chicken, head down, elbows winging furiously against the sides of his lungs. We laughed doing the chicken walk behind him, not knowing it kept him from drowning. He had to lie down twice a day on nurse's table for her to pummel loose the thick grey sputum. I wonder maybe he died of cystic fibrosis before he could know romantic love. I thought of him one night 4,000 miles and years from there, 2 years without touch, as I again touched someone beautiful. I remembered David. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. That was very, very deep and fascinating to listen to. And thanks a million. The next poet I would really say is actually our very own. Afric McGlinchey is also a salmon poet. As we know, she has published The Lucky Star of Hidden Things and Ghost of the Fisher Cat. She too was a recipient of the Kavanagh Fellowship in 2023, and she too has been broadcast on radio with excerpts from her publication Broken Sleep books that came out in 2021. But her newest publication is The Throat Bird, a pamphlet, one of two pamphlets that came out with Survision, and it came out this year. So please give a warm welcome to Afric McGlinchey.
Hi everyone. Please bear with me, I've got a bit of a throat. It's really, really fantastic to be here. Thank you so much, Paul, for inviting me, and it was great to hear your work, David. Actually, we've got so many things in common. We've lived in a whole load of different countries, and I think there's some embedded abuse in both of our works, but we hopefully travel over those lightly. In my new pamphlet, The Throat Bird, I tend to focus on an image, and in this one I focused on a bird actually inside a human throat. In my Tied to the Wind, I focus on a feather, and in Ghost of the Fisher Cat, I have a cat. I usually write autobiographical poetry and just use that image to kind of center my focus. So this one, I'm centering on an awareness of the body, really, and how because we experience the world through our bodies, and we also impact the body of the planet through our acts. So it's really about the body and the body of the planet. And also the fact of the bird in the throat makes me think of it. It suggests our state of anxiety in our current times, and the way our voices behave when we feel apprehensive. Example. Our voices kind of grow small and a little bit strangled sometimes. So that was the reason for the image, which I have to thank my partner Michael Ray for. He did an amazing job of somehow capturing exactly what I wanted. I'll start with a poem that is responding to something that Louis de Puert said yesterday. He was talking about the refugee situation in Dublin and the catastrophe that, it's such a mess the way the government is handling it. not only just, first of all, handing out tents and expecting refugees to live in them during the winters, but also systematically coming along and then removing those tents with their possessions in them. But what he didn't mention was that there are, aside from the abuse that they get from random right-wing people, there are also a lot of volunteers in Dublin who actually go around, go back down to the canals and try and help those refugees. My sister is one of those volunteers, and so I'm thinking of her, and I'm also thinking about an exhibition that I saw some years ago of black and white photographs of refugees from Syria, and I was very struck by one photograph where I saw two sisters holding hands desperately. So in this poem, I'm actually in the voice of one of those sisters. I've arrived, I've found safe haven, and I'm waiting for my sister to join me. And there's an epigraph by Mary Shelley. Nothing is so painful to the human mind as a great and sudden change. Sorry. My sister can run for hours. Like an animal, she knows how to hide. She watches what goes on in the valley below, people passing on foot at the base of the mountain, phone screens flashing like Lucifer stars. She's gone somewhere high, far from those who decide who is unacceptable, far from what is unacceptable. I can imagine her singing that no one wants death today, that nobody's going to die, and her feet feel safe. Want an apple? A free ticket? Offering nonchalance, and then accepting a coffee with her mouth open, perhaps her luck turning into no one refusing to let her stay. And that bicycle she's riding has been given to her, and hers is the wild spirit through counties of irregular shapes. Get past the black nights, I wrote in my letter. You'll find open doors. She'll be wondering what's next. So a few of these poems are about my parents. They always creep into my poems. My father, well, he was a fantastic storyteller, and he used to love telling stories about his near-death experiences, of which there were many. He had apparently he'd survived 13 car crashes, and he also said he faced an execution squad in the Congo until there was a sudden rescue. Maybe some of the stories were true, but we'll never know. But actually, in the end, it was literally the scaffolding of his body that let him down. So this is called Bone. Once charismatic, a mighty presence. These past 10 years, you've been reduced to a skeleton, resurrecting memories, the dog hoarding his bone. Still, you sit at the counter of the party, not wanting anything else. Being alive is all you need. The rending sound of a firing squad is not the sound you will hear. You make of tomorrow a blindfold. You are the anthill of rituals, though yours is a house being torn apart, the hole in the roof, howling rubble. So the next one is, let me see. Yeah. So I love all the weathers of our island, but I was married to a Zimbabwean for some years, and he really struggled with Irish weather, especially in winter. So this poem is called The Body Washed Dark. A tree of naked branches, holding the same lone crow every morning on the same bare limb, the way a pair of lungs holds a packet of air in its upper reaches, the erratic black flap of it clattering baggily among the shadows, and your iron door creaks and clicks with the slow burning, shortening days, your bird heart momentarily opening its red beak to let out a quill of crackled notes, and the barren ground beyond the gate absorbs the slow drizzle that will deepen to rain. And I am holding you again. I changed my mind about reading some of these poems, so I'm reading others now. So yes, so I was married for 17 years, and you expect that that person is going to be the person you will sleep next to for your whole life. And when that doesn't turn out to be the case, it's quite a shock and a surprise to find yourself with a new lover. And sometimes in those moments of intensity, you find yourself migrating. So this is called Elsewhere. In a moment of refraction and shadow, a plane floats overhead delicately as a feather. Egyptian cotton wafts. A train somewhere whistles. You aren't happy, he tells me, unless you consider yourself happy. The afternoon light is falling in a diagonal the length of the floor, an arrowed line of black gunpowder. I follow it, feel him brace for it, and then I'm migrating. I'm gone, and there's only grief here. Let me see. Maybe it's this one. Yeah, okay, so, sorry, I'm so sorry about my throat. My mum, I suppose my first the biggest relationship one can have is with your mother, certainly in the early years. So this poem is about my relationship with her. My father was in the Congo for 6 months, and so when he came back, he had been gone for a third of my life, and I didn't recognize him. So this was called Blue. My mama was like a deep-sea vampire squid that uses fine-haired filaments to browse on algae, fecal matter, marine snow. Crumbs lit on by long fingers and scooped onto her tongue. She always stood. She had no plate of her own. I'd leave her my crusts. Each morning, my arms were rivers running towards her. Her arms were a cat's cradle I'd have put to sea in. When she smiled, I smiled, and the whole house pulsed with our skip to the kitchen laughter. I began screaming, banging my spoon when I saw through the door a man in uniform, blue beret. She became a parcel of tendon and spewing ink, whiplash collision. I felt her voice, body to my limbs, stared at the derelict snowflakes floating from the wasteland of the ceiling, until she whirled back through the door, heaving roomfuls of air, and lifted me. He thought he could stroll back in after 6 long months with that caterpillar over his mouth and not scare you? Well, I wrung that thought right out of him. He was left on the step with a bowl of water, foam, and a razor. I gave her the full loaf of my love, stroked tendrils, crooned. What am I doing for time? I might come back to that one if I have time. Okay, yeah. When we were living in Limerick, I suppose I was about 12 to 15, we had this huge painting. It was literally that size. And it was really amazing. In the foreground, there was like a fist-sized bull in a stadium, and in the background, kind of blurred, you could see the crowd and you could see the matador. But the bull was pawing at the dust, and the dust was kind of swirling around like that, and it became redder and redder and redder. So it was like this blood orange rage. You could just, it was basically a symbol of the feelings he was having. And yeah, so it made me think about, and I used to be a really good girl. I was always, the people pleaser, the one who kept the peace in our home. And But this bull, when I stood in front of that bull, I suddenly, I don't know, channeled that rage, and it allowed me to feel, kind of gave me permission to feel anger as well, and I had a lot to be angry about. Anyway, so this bull, and in fact these days, especially after yesterday's amazing readings, I was just thinking about nation states and how any vulnerable people, anybody who's in a weaker position, how that rage might build up in them. So this, and I also wanted to submit this poem to a journal that had a call out for poems on the theme of blackjack. So I just called my bull Blackjack. Blackjack. In every dream, I walk out of the arena all the way to Torres Novas, but wake to a death stench, blood whirlpools, that battalion of red flags. They say you taste blood they say you taste iron when you get speared, and only mosquitoes clap at your écarté over the muddy Guadalquivir. What the hell's the point? I'm just a freak show to these vultures, and I'll say this, there won't be a mass pilgrimage to the frozen relics of bulls. All I've got to look forward to is that slow, unspeakable kill. So why not? They say you should aim for the navel, spike guts and gore until the matador bubbles saliva like caviar. Then head for the peace, shimmering over the hills. Sorry, that's a bit graphic. Let me see. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. I'll read you this one. How am I doing for time? This is called a kind of light at work. It was going to be a dark poem, and then I decided, I don't know, I just wanted a little bit of hope, and I was hoping that the earth could somehow manage to cope with what we're doing to it, what we're inflicting on it. So a kind of light at work. Look at the beach, strewn with plastic and wrack, and that small girl immersed in the shallows, next to a bucket, bleached colourless and brimming. She stands in a trance. Perhaps she sees atoms separate, or wonders at all the conjunctions. In her gestures, she offers an attitude. Isn't the beach always new? She begins tossing in baubles, plastic hearts, which pulse against the sea's throat. What a complicated labyrinth. Just one more and one more into an ocean that keeps taking stuff in, won't leave it to the sun to swallow the earth, or earth's body to yield to black night. So this one. So the one home we all have is, in fact, our bodies, because it travels with us wherever we are in the world, and we experience our life and reality through these bodies of ours and through our senses. So then, for women, along comes menopause, and your body just turns into a foreign country. So this is called tumbling. All kinds of things are happening to me. Skin's becoming scaly, forehead a terrain of anthills, and my feet are stiffening as though belonging to a corpse. Hair's falling out, of course, and there's my mind. I try to read, see only whirlwinds on the page, and even when the words behave, I could be gazing at some complicated log of random numbers. Enough of this, I say. Take to the beach. Perhaps it's distance my eyes are seeking. But there I find fish tumbling from the sky, myself face up in a clump of seaweed, foamy wavelets eddying about me. Almost blinding, the light is different from what I'm used to, and I wonder if I'm dreaming. back in the southern hemisphere, if this sinking will have a rising too. The next cat out the bag's a female, 15 or so, standing, mouth ajar, saying nothing. A mackerel on my belly, flapping. I see her stare, want to reach a hand, see if I can touch her. But suddenly she's not there, and I come to, still lying in damp sand like a heavy log. There's nothing for it but to roll over, watch the water gouge a groove where my body's been. Back home, I make a cup of tea. The kettle boils. I lift a green mug from a hook, pour and squeeze a lemon in. So far, so good. I wash pots and pans, utensils, stare out at laundry, ponder. The light is dimming, and a rush of heat comes over me. A massive bank of thunderclouds controls the sky. I put on headphones. Rain pounds against the window. I close the blinds, turn up the volume, dance until my body feels 15. So I've only got, how long have I got? Right, I wonder if yeah. All right, I'll read one more from here, and then I'll do one flash piece from my memoir. This one is, trying to cheer myself up. Actually, this should have gone into Ghost of the Fisher Cat, but it somehow didn't get into that, for some reason, into that collection, and I'm still quite fond of it. It's called Something Like Air, and there is an epigraph by Carl Sandburg. The fog comes in on little cat feet. The days slip by underfoot like light in midwinter, and I'm taken back to a different city, talking to myself in a different anonymous room. Feel as though I've been lunging at the wrong things all my life, unhooking. Oh, never mind. There's so much I want to say before it's all over the place and in various registers, always, of course, about that vice of most romantics, collapsing, tragic, trudging up some narrow stairs as though in a Hitchcock movie. Or maybe not. I watch a couple ambling near some kind of obelisk, longing to touch. Try a relationship even Catullus would be curious about. Well, why not? We all need a wow, something to dream of what we can do when we're not dreaming. There's so much time and none, something like air, a lack. The fog comes first, much later, across the waters of the possible. Who knows? The sun might burn everything clear. So I will read, I was going to read, I'll read the first one. So this is, this book here is about my childhood. It's written in the form of flash pieces, so it's kind of lots of white space. We had a bit of a kaleidoscopic life. You know, the minute we had landed somewhere, we were off again somewhere else. So it was very hard to latch on to anything. Thus the feather. A stranger came up to me one day and said, if you tie yourself to anything, tie yourself to the wind. And I never forgot that. And actually, she wrote it down on a piece of paper and gave it to me, and I had stuck it in my jeans pocket, and I found it some time later. So the feather has become my kind of symbol and reminding me that, you know, not to get too attached to anything except, you know, people, certain people. So this was the piece I'm going to read now is about the first migration, and actually my first active agency. I was 5 years of age, and this is called The First Migration, or Running Away After the First Slap. Salt Hill, Galway. Gates ticking by like dark shirts on a line, black as the blobs of rage in my chest, which fade as I begin counting. 1, 2, 5, 11, because I'm 4 and no numbers. Just like I know that we're nearly at the blue sea because the wind is blowing us a salt kiss. And daffodils bounce yellowly on their stems like a brass band marching to a silent tune. 3, 7, And birds follow us, air surfing from telegraph pole to tree, and I look through the bars of each gate to strangeness, to a different front door, and this is my foot, I say, staring down, and my other foot, 1, 2, I tell Ivor, who doesn't know how to count yet because he's only 3. And then I look up, and the sky is sending messages I can't hear. Something to do with the clouds coming in, eating up the sun, all the high fly blue vanishing until everything is as grey as the road under our bare feet. And I know that green is softer than tar, so I cross over, calling Ivor to follow. See the grass, I say, turning around, but my little brother is whimpering and trotting towards us. Long-haired and horned is a billy goat, like the trip-trap monster from our fairy tale book. And then I'm running back, dragging my little brother's hand past gate after gate, blundering into a question. How will I know my own home? Thank you.
Wow, thank you so very, very much. That was something else. I think we have a very short moment for a question for you guys. And if you want to come up, maybe both of you, makes it a bit more presentable for every one of us. We can see all of us. So, I've prepared a few questions, and it's hard for me to pick one, but I think the question I'd like to ask you, David, is what role does poetry, do you think, for society? Is it more than just a beautiful art?
Oh, God, that's very difficult. Does poetry have the ability to change the world, or is it more than a beautiful act? Yeah, I mean, I don't set out to change the world. Like in this book, I'm not trying to be an activist, but I think it could function to help people in difficult times or moments. But I don't start out to do that. Do I think, yeah, I don't know. I have to, sorry, keep it brief. There's political poets, and I think if a poem comes about something in the world, that's great, but it has to come naturally. If it doesn't come naturally, then I don't think it's not going to work. So, sorry, not a great answer.
Maybe it wasn't the best question.
No.
But I think it goes heart by heart. Afric, I would like to ask you, which one of the places you have lived in is the most inspiring for you to write about?
Oh my goodness, that's a difficult question. That is so difficult. I found myself, when I was living in Zimbabwe, I really resisted the landscape. I just really found it difficult to connect karmically, psychically, to that inland place. And it was very brown when I first arrived there. They'd had a drought for a long time. And so everything just, and I'm used to green and blue and white and wild oceans. So I really resisted. And it took a long time for me to start seeing the beauty there, because I had to learn how to see through all the browns, the various golds and reds and oranges and other subtleties. And it took me a long time to kind of change my perception of beauty and of what I respond to. And then when I came back to Ireland, I found that I was actually writing a lot about Africa. Even though I live by the sea in West Cork with Michael, and I couldn't imagine living anywhere else, and I don't think I could ever not live near the sea. But maybe I'll have to go back to Zimbabwe in order to write more about Ireland. I don't know. But yeah, so I can't say. It's, they're all inside me somewhere, all those images.
Thanks very much. Thank you. A big applause.